Welcome to Sound Bites. I'm Alex Melshine, and today we have a special guest with us, Shani Abrahams from Shani and Jane Redesign. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thanks for joining us today.
I'm so glad to be here.
So you are here talking about a topic that I get asked a lot of questions. As a real estate agent, people are constantly coming to me and they're saying, how do I age in place? Do I age in place? Do I downsize? So what do you tell people to get the process started? What should they consider as they're making a decision? Do I age in place or do I downsize?
Well, there are a number of different considerations that it's important for somebody to have. They need to know, look at their financial stability, what is their health, what is their physical health, what is their mental health. Those are all very important considerations to take. And also, what is their home like? What is the space like? Is it something that can be adapted so that it can accommodate them? Because even if somebody is very active and healthy now, they need to think a little bit, because when you're looking at aging in place, you're looking at not just for the immediate, but if you want to be able to look down the road. And it's wonderful, people, even when they're in their teens and 20s, 30s and on, they can have challenges that would make a space physically difficult, and that's where universal design comes in, which is a part of aging in place. Aging in place, it's very important because the emotional component is also significant in aging in place. Is this a space, is this a home where somebody has raised their family, where they were with their spouse who maybe isn't even with them? How isolated will a person be? These are different things that need to go into consideration. It's not just about the brick and mortar. And the brick and mortar is very important, but the whole person, it's a very holistic approach to looking at.
Well, that's great. And so even when I'm showing properties to potential home buyers who aren't necessarily at that point where they're thinking about aging in place, but they're sort of starting to maybe have the inkling like this may be my last house that I'll ever own, what would you say, what should they be looking for in regards to bricks and mortar? Like, what should that footprint look like? Is there a footprint for it that they should be looking for?
There are some things to take into consideration. One of them is even outside the brick and mortar. What kind of a community is it? What kind of a neighborhood is it? And I have clients who have moved because they want to be in more of a walkable environment, because there may be time they don't want to drive, or weather, or whatever it may be. But of the actual brick and mortar, how adaptable is it? Is it possible to have one level living? That's very important. Most people don't want to have to, work with the seats that go up and down the stairs. I know the ranch house I was in, the laundry room was downstairs, but I thought through, if I had decided to remain there, that I could have put the washer and dryer on the same level. So same level living is very important. Now, there are some things that are doable at any time, and they're not really expensive, but there are some things that are more challenging. What is the traffic flow in the home? What is it between the different halls and doors and rooms? Without opening up walls to make passageways larger, would a walker or wheelchair potentially work in there? And it's not that difficult to open doorways a little bit, but if you have a lot of turns, that could make it a little bit more difficult, even on a ranch. Is there a bathroom on the same floor? Could there be a master bedroom on the main floor? And the social room, in bi-levels and, all different areas. Sometimes there's, split levels. There's so many different things that could be stumbling blocks. Those are things to consider. And what kind of outdoor space might there be? And windows.
So one of the things that I always, when I'm showing properties to a buyer that has expressed interest to me that they want to eventually age in place in a property, it's that emotional piece that you talked about, that sometimes they're not ready to commit to it. And I will sometimes say to them, this would be a great, home for you because it's one floor living. And oftentimes buyers will just look at me as, what are you talking about? Because they sometimes forget that they're aging in place. Can you talk a little bit more about that emotional, like what's involved with somebody who's not quite ready, but they know it's coming up?
Sometimes with the emotional, people feel that they're mortal and they're ageless. And it's hard to plan for that. But it's important to think about it, and part of your job as a professional is to bring that up. You may not be able to necessarily dwell on it, but to bring it up and say, there are some things that you still may want to keep in consideration. It's part of my fiduciary responsibility to be a full care realtor for you. And also sometimes bringing in that in all stages of life, and how wonderful if they're very active and they're 50 or 60 and they still play tennis, that you don't want to plan for it or anticipate it's going to happen, but what if you have a little bit of an accident and then you're back on the court within weeks, but to consider what you might need to do. So it's making it so it's not necessarily inevitable, but incorporated into the reality of life.
So one of the other questions that I have, and this is something so I'm from Ann Arbor, Michigan, and
great place.
University of Michigan is
Yes.
Located there. We also have Michigan Medicine, which is one of the highly ranked hospitals
Yes.
in the country. And so we actually have people who are relocating to the area because they want to be close to their doctors and with a great medical system. Do you see that as an impact as people are trying to age in place and thinking about aging in place? Does medicine come into play with it as well?
It does. And that's where what kind of services might be available for the people who are relocating near to a medical center. And as I said earlier, it's medical center and it's other resources that they need. The couple I know that moved from a lovely home, almost a ranch, they moved to another lovely home, not a ranch, but they could use just a first floor because they could walk to the grocery store, the coffee shop, and their doctor's office. So when you mention the people going for medical, that is definitely a key component. How accessible is it going to be? How accessible for emergency room? How accessible for their regular appointments, for their physical therapy? It makes it much more difficult, and people start driving less,
Right.
or only in the daytime. And the other thing that's starting to happen more is looking at communities. What kind of communities develop in these neighborhoods? Because the emotional component and the functioning, if you don't have children nearby, if you don't have any other family, your community becomes more of your family, and you become a village. It may not be every day, but you know that they're there. You know your doctors are nearby. And in looking for housing and making a decision, these are really important things to think about.
And that makes a lot of sense, that it's not, you don't necessarily have to move to where your kids live or where you have family nearby. You can build your own community, in any city or town, as long as, you can make those connections. So that's great to know. So what do you see as, from a new construction standpoint? What do you, from a builder standpoint and us showing properties that are new construction, what should we be advising people as they're now designing their spaces that they should be mindful of when they're thinking about, eventually aging in place in a property?
Different ways of approaching. For one thing, I'm not very technical, but technology is more wire-free, so that's helpful. How is that going to work in their home? But some very basic things are helpful if they're incorporated. Right off the bat, they can be stylish. Grab bars, they don't have to look industrial. And being a designer, a redesigner, a home stager, and specializing with people aging in place, that is so important too. It does not have to look institutional. And so anything that can be incorporated in the initial construction, if it's a new build, do it. Light switches, not the old flip, but more of the toggle. I mean, that's fairly common sense, but people don't necessarily think of it. And there's also usually a light attached to the toggle. So that gives another additional element of safety. You also want to look at different colors for surfaces. Counters and floors, ideally, as your vision changes, you want to be able to see the contrast. So when you're putting something on the counter, it's not going to just drop on the floor because you don't see that demarcation. Those are a couple very important things. And some people prefer the aesthetics of two handles at a sink. It's again better one handle, the control of that. And to also look at what the reachability is. And these are just very basic things. There are more things that can be considered, but surface treatments, the colors, the textures, the layout. You don't necessarily want your master bath to look like you're in a hospital room, but you still want to think about the width of the door. What if you do need a walker or wheelchair and somebody to help walk in there with you? But don't overdo it. I mean, really, really think about that. And also the accessibility for in and outside of the house. That's a big safety thing. So these are some of the things, and lighting outside. And where is your house street number going to be? It is very important for emergency personnel to be able to identify a house. And so often, I drive around and I say, oh, they didn't do that. That you want to see numbers that are lit.
And just as a real estate agent showing properties, I also would like that, because sometimes I'm driving around trying to find the house that I'm supposed to show or a seller that I'm supposed to meet. And you bring up really good points of things that I haven't even considered, the contrast in surfaces, the type of materials that you use. So those are things that I haven't considered, but I'm really happy that you mentioned one thing, and that's not to overdo it. Because I've had properties on the market before where people have overdone it. You know, they've made it almost like their home. They made it look like it's a hospital. And so I'm really glad that you've said that. Are there any other things that, as people are remodeling, you know, not just building a new house, but remodeling, that people should be mindful of as they're thinking about aging in place?
What kind of social groupings can they have so that they're comfortable when they pick new furniture? To be thinking about, if you're in a chair, it's not necessarily that you want the chair that's going to raise you up, but a chair that has a little more firmness in arms so that you can push up a little bit. And also a place that, even if you are looking at, you know, this is going to be you forever and it's you and your spouse, have another space so that if you do need a caretaker there at any time, or a child to stay over, if you can do that, it just keeps your own private space that much more private when you need somebody else there with you.
Great. One of the other things that I'm also hearing about fairly frequently is when I'm showing properties to potential buyers and they're saying, you know, my elderly mother, father may be moving in with us. And generally all they want to do is they want to find something that has a bedroom or bedroom space on the first floor and somehow be able to put a first floor bathroom of some sort, which not every house has that because, you know, generally the colonials have, you know, all the bedrooms are upstairs. And then I've also had clients who've said, you know what, mom and dad can live in the nicely finished walkout basement. What advice do you have to those people who are thinking that their parents may have to move in with them at some point?
Well, I think that's wonderful if it will work with the dynamics. And ideally, try to create a little bit more of a feeling of an apartment suite. Because there are times your parents want privacy too. You know, you're thinking about some of your privacy, but what if a friend comes over? It's nice to have something where you have your bed, but maybe you have almost an alcove, if you can't have a completely separate room. It's like thinking back to when you had your first studio apartment, and how did you make it so not everybody's always in the bedroom? And so you create different spaces. And a little refrigerator. It's so lovely when people can do that. It's about the quality of life of the person inside themselves and how the outside environment can support them.
And then are there certifications? So if, for example, I'm assuming you're probably not going to come and do a consultation in Michigan, at least not on the east side of Michigan. Are there organizations that someone can look up to find somebody who has similar sort of certifications as you do?
Yes. I'm CAP certified, that's Certified Aging in Place Specialist. And the people who have the CAP certification, it is supported by ARP, the Housing Association. There are designers, contractors, occupational therapists. Many of us do go and obtain this certification. A contractor I know, when somebody had a stroke, actually waited to put some pieces into the bathroom until the person came home, because you have to think there are going to be changes after a stroke. So it's very important to work with somebody who has the knowledge, and somebody who may not know everything, but they have resources, just like I have resources, that I can get information to help a client achieve what they need.
Great. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Shani.
My pleasure.
Really appreciate it. And this has been another episode of Soundbites. My name is Alex Melshine. Thanks for joining us today.